Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Sunday, 10th August 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is moving forward with plans to seize control of Gaza City, facing international condemnation and internal opposition. The UN has warned that this offensive risks unleashing another calamity on the territory. Netanyahu expects to complete a new Gaza offensive fairly quickly, stating it is the best way to end the war. He directed the military to bring in more foreign journalists, but access to Gaza remains restricted to military embeds. Thousands of Israelis protested in Tel Aviv against Netanyahu's plan to escalate the Gaza war, demanding the release of hostages. Public opinion polls indicate that a majority of Israelis favor an immediate end to the war to secure the release of the remaining 50 hostages held by militants in Gaza. Conflict has resulted in the deaths of multiple Al Jazeera journalists. Al Jazeera condemned the killing of its journalists by Israeli forces in Gaza, calling the incident an assassination of its Gaza correspondents and photographers. Al Jazeera reported that 4 of its journalists, including correspondent Anas al-Sharif, were killed in an Israeli strike in Gaza City. Israel claimed it targeted al-Sharif because he worked for Hamas, an accusation Al Jazeera denies, referring to al-Sharif as one of Gaza's bravest journalists and stating the attack is a desperate attempt to silence voices in anticipation of the occupation of Gaza. Al Jazeera correspondent Hani Mahmoud gave more details on the Israeli attack that killed 5 of his colleagues. The journalists were killed in a targeted Israeli attack on a tent housing journalists near Al-Shifa Hospital, Gaza City. Israel later admitted to the deliberate attack on the journalist, known for frontline coverage, in a strike on a tent outside Al-Shifa Hospital. Britain, France, and Germany have adopted a tougher stance, spurred by images of starving children and Israel's planned expansion of settlements. Prime Ministers Keir Starmer of Britain and President Emmanuel Macron of France announced plans to recognize the State of Palestine last month. In other related events, Antifa activists disrupted a broadcast in Israel to protest the war on Gaza. Palestinian paler al-Sadiq Khan Suleiman Obaid was killed in an attack by the Israeli military in southern Gaza while waiting to collect aid, according to the Palestinian Football Association. Mohamed Salah has questioned UEFA's farewell to former Palestinian soccer player Suleiman Obaid. Ukraine is at the center of diplomatic tensions as the Trump administration explores avenues to end the war with Russia, raising fears among Ukrainian and European leaders about potential concessions to Moscow. They seek to present a united front before a planned summit between Presidents Trump and Putin, which Putin sees as a chance to conclude the war on his terms and potentially fracture the Western alliance. European leaders, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, are urging Trump to include Ukraine in the summit, with Merz hoping President Zelensky will participate in any bilateral discussion. U.S. Vice President Vance believes a peace deal is unlikely to fully satisfy either side, while Trump has suggested Russia and Ukraine were close to a ceasefire that might require Ukraine to cede territory. Zelensky emphasized Ukraine fully supports joint statement by European leaders, stressing that the end of the war must be fair. He thanked those who stand with Ukraine for the sake of peace. Meanwhile, hostilities persist, with recent Russian strikes resulting in 5 deaths in Ukraine. While a refinery was hit in Russia, Ukraine has been conducting drone attacks deeper into Russian territory, including one that caused a fatality and damaged an industrial facility in Saratov, Russia, with Ukrainian media reporting that an oil refinery in the city caught fire after the attack. Russian air defense claims it destroyed 121 Ukrainian drones overnight including 8 over the Saratov region. In response, Ukraine claims it struck a Russian oil refinery. In occupied Luhansk, Ukraine, residents are facing shortages of electricity and water, as well as rising food prices, as Moscow pressures them to accept Russian citizenship. Within the Russian government, Sergei Kirienko, first Deputy Chief of Staff, manages the political aspects of the war, having risen among skilled managers overseeing the Russian state. Dmitry N. Kozak, a key Putin aide, reportedly presented Putin with a proposal to halt the fighting but lost influence to Kirienko, who supports the military action. Kozak has privately voiced his opinion that the invasion was a mistake. Turning to the United Kingdom, hiring intentions among British businesses are at a record low, driven by escalating employment costs and economic uncertainty. Surveys indicate a pessimistic outlook on hiring activity, pay levels, and overall business confidence, with young people particularly affected by the decline in recruitment. The UK government is considering new road safety measures, including potential mandatory eye tests for older drivers and a reduced drink drive limit, along with stricter penalties for uninsured drivers and those failing to wear seatbelts. UK police have arrested 522 individuals during London protests in support of Palestine action, with over 100 of those arrested being over 70 years old. In London, hundreds marched to demand Hamas release Israeli hostages in Gaza and to criticize Britain's planned recognition of a Palestinian state. Chief Rabbi Sir Ephraim Mevis criticized Labour's pledge to recognize a Palestinian state at a national march for the hostages in London. The march was organized by Jewish groups and joined by family members of Israeli hostages taken on 7 October. China is undergoing significant political and social transformations while navigating complex international relationships. Xi Jinping is consolidating power following military corruption scandals, with the goal of modernizing the People's Liberation Army by 2027, highlighting concerns about combat readiness and political stability. Adding to the internal shifts, senior diplomat Liu Jiankao was reportedly detained for questioning in late July after an overseas trip. On the economic front, the U.S. government is considering imposing tariffs on Chinese imports in response to China's purchases of Russian oil, potentially mirroring the 25% tariff previously applied to Indian imports. NVIDIA and ARM may be required to remit 15% of their revenue from China chip sales to the U.S. government to secure export licenses for NVIDIA's H20 and ARM's MIth300 and 8 chip. Domestically, China has launched a nationwide child care subsidy program offering families 3,600 yuan, use $501 annually per child under 3 years old, to address demographic challenges. In science, a new gene editing tool developed by Chinese scientists enables precise manipulation of millions of DNA base pairs, marking advancements in genetic engineering. Unitary Robotics anticipates that advancements in AI could trigger a ChatGPT moment for robotics within 2 years. Creatai is actively developing a RAA video game inspired by Louis Cha Long-Yung's martial arts novels. Tragically, recent heavy rains led to dozens of deaths in Beijing and Hebei province, including 31 in a Maiyun district nursing home, marking the 5th such disaster in northern China since 2012. The nation is also actively shaping its national identity, exemplified by the airing of a documentary, Zuo Zongtang Recovers in Jiang, aimed at countering Western narratives and reinforcing Chinese national identity in ethnic minority regions. A recent Chinese film depicting Japanese war crimes during the 1937 Nanking Massacre is seen as an invisible battle to gain international recognition of the countries suffering in WHAM. Approximately 22,000 people participated in security preparations and rehearsals in central Beijing for a military parade scheduled for September 3 to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. In the realm of international relations, China has urged Australian authorities to severely punish those responsible for an attack on a Chinese student in Tasmania. Amid ongoing tensions in the South China Sea, analysts suggest the Philippines can draw lessons from Poland's defense strategies and stance against Russia. Harvard Kennedy School historian Rana Mitter suggests China's best interests lie in a peaceful Asia-Pacific. Turning to the Philippines, analysts suggest the nation can learn from Poland's defense strategies and approach toward external pressures, especially amidst ongoing tensions with China in the South China Sea. Both countries may find strategic common ground as emerging middle powers. Finally, Poland's increased defense spending and firm stance against Russia are drawing attention from Filipino security analysts. The Philippines seeks to learn from Poland's strategies as both countries navigate their roles as emerging middle powers. Japan is managing multiple challenges, including the 80th anniversary commemoration of the Nagasaki atomic bombing. Recent heavy rains triggered an emergency warning for Kumamoto Prefecture, leading to bullet train service cancellations and urgent calls for safety. The Osaka Expo is combating Japan's summer heat with measures like giant umbrellas and mist fans. Public schools may soon see cram school lecturers as instructors, funded by the upcoming budget. Resona Holdings will enable debit card users to monitor their carbon footprint. A British F-35 fighter jet made an emergency landing due to a malfunction. The country is mourning the loss of soccer legend Kunishige Kamamoto, who passed away at 81. A high school baseball team withdrew from a national tournament following social media controversy. Two Japanese boxers, Shigetoshi Kotari and Hiromasa Urakawa, died from brain injuries sustained in Tokyo matches. Turning to international affairs, Japan has voiced strong concern over Israel's control of Gaza City, according to Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya, following the decision by Israel's security cabinet. Meanwhile, China has released Dead to Rights, a film documenting the 1937 Nanking Massacre. The director sees the film as part of an invisible battle to increase international recognition of China's wartime suffering. The film is based on the true story of an apprentice who unearthed evidence of the atrocities that were then used in a war crimes tribunal. Ukraine fears the United States and Russia might strike a deal without considering Ukrainian interests, potentially imposing unfavorable terms on Kyiv. This concern followed a perceived unsuccessful meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelensky in late February, prompting Ukraine to reassess its strategy with the Trump administration. President Zelensky has rejected Donald Trump's suggestion of swapping territory. Despite this, Zelensky sought to improve relations with the Trump administration, aided by European allies, and believed progress was underway. Ahead of a potential Russia-US summit, Zelensky garnered diplomatic support from Europe and NATO, anticipating challenges from President Putin. Supporting this international effort, Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy and Vice President J.D. Vance attended a meeting of European and Ukrainian leaders in Chevenix, England. Some observers fear that Donald Trump rewarding the Kremlin's hardline attitude shows Russia can still sideline Ukraine from deal to end war. In Russia, Sergei Kirienko has emerged as a pivotal figure in President Vladimir Putin's administration, showcasing his adaptability within the Russian political landscape. He was present at President Putin's annual State of the Nation address in Moscow in 2024. Australia is poised to officially recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September a decision anticipated to be finalized by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. This action places Australia alongside countries like France, Britain, and Canada, reinforcing the government's conviction that a two-state solution is the optimal route to resolving the conflict, alleviating suffering, and addressing starvation in Gaza. Labour, MP at Huzik, has voiced his strong support for this initiative, urging its prompt implementation, while Albanese has confirmed ongoing collaboration with states and territories on the matter. The Melbourne Star Observation Wheel is scheduled to resume operations in 2026 under the stewardship of MB Star Properties, Pti Ltd, subsequent to an $11 million acquisition and restructuring. Despite the wheel's track record of operational hurdles, one of the new owners expressed some uncertainty regarding the venture's future prospects. A new study has highlighted inequalities in career advancement opportunities for Australian workers, contingent on their socioeconomic status. The findings indicated that fewer than half of class marginalized workers received career development support in the past year, in stark contrast to 76% of privileged employees. Separately, residents in central Victoria reported witnessing a substantial meteor characterized as an exceptionally bright fireball, accompanied by a loud sonic event. Observations and narratives were exchanged on the Australian Meteor Reports Facebook group. India has been conducting immigration raids, detaining thousands, largely Muslims, and sparking fear, especially among Bengali speakers, with officials citing national security. Critics argue these raids disproportionately target individuals based on religion and language, particularly in BJP-governed states. In Indian-administered Kashmir, the government has declared 25 books forfeit, seen as an attempt to stifle dissent. India and Australia are also strengthening their strategic minerals partnership, begun in 2022, to counter China's dominance in rare earth elements. The countries are negotiating joint ventures for sourcing and processing critical minerals. Afghanistan is currently grappling with serious allegations regarding the safety of United Nations female Afghan staff, as the Taliban investigate reported death threats against them related to their work, threats the UN has confirmed in a report. Despite the ongoing investigation, the Taliban have denied any involvement in these threats. Meanwhile, a planned visit by the Afghan foreign minister to Pakistan has been cancelled, a decision likely stemming from the international sanctions he faces, which necessitates special approval from the UN Sanctions Committee for any foreign travel. Further complicating matters, recent reports indicate that the Taliban detained Mahmoud Habi on suspicion that the CIA had infiltrated the company where he was employed. Austria saw a near disaster averted and a man survived, holding onto a high-speed train after exiting for a cigarette break near St. Polten. An emergency stop brought him back inside. Turning to Great Britain, Tesla has applied for an electricity supply license from Ofgem. But Elon Musk's company intends to supply electricity to homes and businesses in the UK if approved. Across the Atlantic, in the United States, Donald Trump has called for the removal of homeless individuals from Washington, D.C. He threatened federal intervention and promised alternative housing outside the city. The U.S. military is also preparing for possible deployment of the D.C. National Guard within the capital. Meanwhile, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands is requesting more time for residents to comment on US military plans for the territory. In Nepal, Kathmandu recently hosted its first Pride rally since funding cuts from the United States, demonstrating continued support for the LGBTQ community. Turkey was struck by a magnitude 6.1 earthquake in Balıkesir province, leading to building collapses and a large-scale rescue operation. The earthquake, which was felt in several provinces, caused one death and numerous injuries. Turkish authorities have recorded multiple aftershocks in the wake of the initial earthquake. The affected region is known for its high seismic activity due to its location on several fault lines. Pakistan's Army Chief, Field Marshal Munir, recently concluded his second visit to the U.S. since June. He met with both political and military leaders during his time there. Munir also addressed the Pakistani diaspora, urging them to remain optimistic about Pakistan's future. He further encouraged them to actively seek investments for the country. Iraq witnessed a chlorine gas leak that led to the hospitalization of over 600 pilgrims. The incident occurred on the road connecting the Shiite holy cities of Najaf and Karbala-Jafel. The health ministry confirmed 621 cases of asphyxia in Karbala due to the leak. Sudan is facing a dire humanitarian crisis in Al-Fashir, where malnutrition claimed the lives of 63 people in 1 week, according to a local health official. A famine had been declared a year prior in displacement camps near the city, and the UN projected that famine conditions would extend into Al-Fashir by May. Syria is at the center of diplomatic efforts as Jordan prepares to host a meeting with Syrian and United States officials. The discussions will focus on reconstruction initiatives, aiming to stimulate the Syrian economy through foreign investment. President Ahmed al-Shara's new administration is actively soliciting international financial support. In a separate development, disturbing security footage emerged from a hospital in Swaida, Syria. The footage purportedly shows men in military uniforms killing a medical worker, sparking outrage and demands for investigation. France is battling a massive wildfire, the largest in half a century, amidst a wave of intense blazes across southern Europe. Looking ahead, France's Minister for Overseas, Manuel Valls, will travel to New Caledonia next week. This follows the pro-independence flanks group's rejection of France's Bougainville project, adding complexity to the region's political landscape. Okay, that's a solid start. It's accurate, concise, and follows the instructions. Now, let's refine it further to truly exemplify the melodious and effortless flow I'm aiming for, while maintaining factual precision. We can subtly rephrase to enhance readability. Well, also consider if there are related trends or policies we can infer or research to add context where ain't permitted in by the instructions. Here's a slightly improved version, focusing on flow and subtly expanding on the context. South Korea is facing a significant challenge to its military strength as its armed forces have shrunk by 20% in the last 6 years. This contraction is a direct consequence of the nation's extremely low birth rate, leading to a dwindling pool of young men available for mandatory military conscription. The Ministry of National Defense has expressed concerns that this demographic shift poses a serious threat to operational readiness and could create critical shortages in officer ranks, potentially requiring adjustments to defense strategies and force deployment in the future. The Netherlands saw activists protesting at a Microsoft data center, claiming the Israeli military stores substantial data there. Demonstrators blocked access to the facility. Some also climbed onto the roof and set off flares. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new measures to combat foreign interference. The measures include establishing a public inquiry into foreign meddling in recent elections. Trudeau also pledged to create a new National Security Committee of parliamentarians. In France, President Emmanuel Macron is facing growing protests over his pension reforms. The reforms will raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Unions have called for further strikes and demonstrations. Meanwhile, in Russia, President Vladimir Putin signed a law banning gender-affirming care. The law prohibits medical interventions and legal recognition of gender changes. It has been condemned by human rights organizations. Ecuador experienced a tragic shooting outside a nightclub that resulted in 8 fatalities. Authorities are currently investigating, with the motive still undetermined. Turning to New Zealand, the government is weighing the recognition of a Palestinian state. A timeline for this decision will be announced soon, with Prime Minister Christopher Luxon expected to comment. Meanwhile, Iran is grappling with a severe triple crisis. Power outages, water shortages, and extreme heat are drastically affecting the lives of Iranian citizens. In a development involving Azerbaijan and Armenia, the United States facilitated an agreement between the two nations. This deal could potentially enhance its influence and create new business opportunities in the region. The potential consequences of this peace deal are being closely examined. Lebanon's government has declared its aim to disarm Hezbollah by year's end. However, Hezbollah has already indicated that it will not comply with this directive. Finally, in Gaza, the challenges of blocked aid and the UN's efforts to combat famine are being discussed by former UN Gaza Coordinator Sigrid Kaag. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.